This is one of the more interesting stories that I think I came across. This is another story behind the song, and as always, we try and do a documentary. And if the reaction gets nuked, hopefully this documentary stays up. So this is part one. We're doing a documentary here. And for part two, we are going to be reacting to the song that we're going to be talking about today. So stay with me. This is going to be Story Behind Today by Smashing Pumpkins. To know the story about today, we actually kind of need to go back to Billy Corgan and his past. Billy Corgan, he didn't really have a normal upbringing. Someone like myself, I come from a dysfunctional family. This is definitely an area to where, on more than one reason, I don't feel comfortable researching this particular side of the story, mostly because when it stems from abuse, I typically want the stance to, well, I would heavily recommend that you hear from the source directly. So because of this, I don't feel like it's my right to really go into detail on this. Things could change over the years, but for the sake of the story, there was a lot of negativity coming from Billy Corgan's father. Billy Corgan's father, he actually was a musician himself. He was a struggling musician trying to find work.
Well, my father was my idol. He was, from my perspective, a living, breathing rock star. He looked like one, he talked like one, he acted like one, and he did drugs like one. So, from my point of view, he was a rock star.
I worked, as a guitar player singer.
He has his fair share of substance abuse. So whether he be under the influence or not, this didn't really make a real difference at home. But Billy Corgan himself, he actually was a bit of an introvert. His father actually had no idea that he was even interested in music.
We didn't have a real close connection when he was young because he was kind of introverted. I never got really much out of him. He didn't speak much, never really showed any interest in music.
Be that as it may, Billy Corgan, he actually did take a particular test when he was going to school. It's definitely a test that I never heard of, and I don't think if it's even still around anymore, and I don't even know even how valid it is, but it sounded like it was a particular test with a series of questions, and you would listen for particular sounds.
Somewhere around age 7 or 8, there was a test in school. They played 3 tones, beep, 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 and you were supposed to say whether the middle of the 3 tones was higher, the same, or lower. It's 120 questions. I remember it very clearly.
It was a way to try and dictate and gauge someone's musical prowess without actually putting an instrument in their hands. Regardless of how accurate it could actually gauge someone's musical knowledge, Billy Corgan actually did something that not a whole lot of students was actually able to do. Mostly because the teachers actually thought it was a fluke, ranking high amongst students throughout the entire state of Illinois. So much so that the teachers advised that they need to have Billy take the test once again. And upon taking the test for the second time, he didn't just get a high score, he got it even higher than he did the first time around. Billy's teachers would actually then write up a particular letter to hand to Billy to try and give it to his parents. And it was a letter that was simply saying, it's probably heavily advised that you probably put your son through various different advanced musical classes, because if what we see from our tests are true, your son actually might be a musical savant. Happy with this information, giving it to his father, Well,
My father's attitude was kind of one of these, like, I don't think it's such a great idea.
sadly, Billy's father didn't take this very seriously. But that wasn't going to stop Billy and his passion for music. Before starting his band that we all know him as today, Billy would actually mess around with various different riffs and guitar solos from all the bands that he loved growing up.
As a guitar player in my mind, I wanted something to frame what I was doing in. So just being able to say play a good solo seemed to be worthless if they didn't have some context. So then I would start making these little songs. I took these little snippets of things, like what if I took the lyricism of a Bob Dylan and combined it with the riffs of Black Sabbath and the atmosphere of Love and Rockets or something? Can I put these things together?
Fast forward, Billy Corgan would eventually form Smashing Pumpkins. Coming off of the success of 1991's Gish, Billy Corgan kind of felt like the eyes were upon him. And pressure wasn't just coming from internal pressure, but there was also external pressure as well. That Smashing Pumpkins needed to put out their next biggest hit, because Smashing Pumpkins' next biggest album would end up being Siamese Dream. But this is truly where the story really begins. And Billy Corgan would actually have all the ingredients of a very successful album. Because actually, as a matter of fact, you got to put your mind in 1993.
We're suddenly thrust into a conversation that was what's going to be the next big band. You saw the success of Nirvana and Pearl Jam. So you start getting this kind of subliminal pressure from the record company. You know, you better start writing some hits, kid.
But much like I said, he did have all the ingredients. Primarily because the producer that he did have helping him out with Siamese Dream is actually the very same producer to Nevermind.
Billy was back in Madison when I actually got the call, because he kept asking me when we were finishing Gish, are you going to do Nevermind? Or are you gonna, well, there was no title yet. Are you going to go work with Nirvana? I had worked in 1990 with Nirvana at Smart. And I walked in and met everybody, and everybody seemed cool, and was like, well, we might as well play one of the songs. And they got behind the kit, and they played Teen Spirit, started with that little scratchy guitar, and Dave did that, and it just exploded. I remember standing up and pacing around the room. I couldn't believe how intense and how powerful they sounded. And there were no mics on Dave's kit, and the drums were just punishing sounding in the room. I mean, it was pretty amazing sounding. I remember literally breaking out into a sweat going, oh my God, this is incredible. And I didn't really know what to do when they finished, except I paused and said, that was really good, you guys. Play it again.
That producer would actually be Butch Vig.
Started Siamese Dream, both Billy and I felt immense pressure. And everyone kept telling us, it's going to be great, it's going to be great. You hear people saying that, and then you get this sort of burden on your shoulder. But in our hearts, Billy and I knew we wanted to take Gish and go from here to here with Siamese Dream.
Butch Vig is the guy that did help Kurt Cobain on his album Nevermind. So to have one of alt-rock's biggest producers at the time to help on his own album, so having a member of the team that could help with his success is exactly what he needed. But that was all the pressures that was kind of coming from more externally. So what exactly were the pressures coming internally? Well, one thing that sure as hell didn't help is their guitarist and bassist was actually on the tail end of their relationship.
The person that's closest to her is James. I mean, they've got a super tight bond. And I know Darcy is definitely his best friend in the world.
Well, it wasn't too common for Darcy to actually lock herself in the bathroom. Their drummer, Jimmy Chamberlain, he didn't help either, as he was suffering from his own addiction with substance abuse.
Took a toll on the band. During a tour stop in New York, drummer Jimmy Chamberlain, who had a history of drug problems.
So if it felt like the band was on the verge of breaking apart, Billy Corgan had his own issues. Feeling the external pressure, Billy himself actually was suffering from writer's block. Battling a deep, dark depression, he was also seeing that he was gaining weight as well. Take a few things what I'm about to say with a grain of salt because it could be more myth and legend. Billy Corgan was actually going through so much that he actually slowly started to sell off some of his belongings. Because in his eyes, he didn't think he would need it where he was going. Because of the writer's block, because of the external pressure to do better, Billy Corgan fell into a deep, dark depression. And if he couldn't think of a song to write, he would think back to his dark past. His dark past that was haunting him. And once again, depending on who you ask, it was believed that Billy Corgan actually went up to a rooftop where he had a pen and a piece of paper to write his very last song before he actually did the inevitable by his own hand. He proceeded to jot down his very last song. Now, regardless of how much what I just said is true, Billy Corgan did write this particular song, and he really wanted to see it through, to the point to where he wanted to see it be produced. And it was that very song that ended up saving his life. And that song is the very song we're going to take a look at today. That song is Today by Smashing Pumpkins.